George explores the grain chain with support from farmers and millers across the UK.
Hi there, I'm at school today and back in the science lab. Yeah, I know. What's bread and baking got to do with test tubes and experiments? Quite a lot. Each ingredient affects how bread rises and cooks, so it's important to understand all about them. Can you remember all the ingredients? There was flour, water, yeast, and last but not least, salt. So they are the basic elements, but there's more going on than you might think. Let's get in closer with the microscope to see the yeast at work. Look, it's like loads of tiny smooth balls. Yeast is a microorganism, one of the tiniest forms of life. It's part of the fungi family, in fact. There are all sorts of yeast, and they're everywhere, on our bodies, even in our bodies, and all around us, in the air too. Strange, right? You're breathing something which helps to make bread. If yeast is placed in a warm, damp surroundings, with starchy or sweet matter, it'll start to multiply. So let's add some warm, sugary water to our sample. Wow! The tiny balls of yeast are multiplying. All this activity produces alcohol and a gas called carbon dioxide. And it's this gas that adds the air to the dough, creating bubbles that make it grow in size. The yeast used by bakers is called Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Sounds a bit like a magic spell, doesn't it? In fact, I think yeast is pretty magical. It's made in laboratories and can be in liquid or dried form. Bakers mostly use the dried stuff. It's like a powder, which makes it really easy to move around and store, which helps when you're making 12 million loaves every day. The important bit is that yeast is a living thing, and if the liquid it's mixed with is too cool, the yeast won't multiply. And if it's too hot, the yeast will be killed. Don't worry, it isn't alive in that way. Another clever bit of science you find in bread is the important protein found in flour, known as gluten. It's incredibly stringy stuff. It may seem a bit weird, but gluten helps make the dough soft as well as strong. Soft, so the dough can expand when the yeast bubbles form, and strong, so that these gas bubbles don't burst. Without gluten, your bread wouldn't be fluffy and the holes would be smaller, more like what you get in a slice of cake. Time to get back in the kitchen for some baking. After all that complicated science, I wanted to make a nice simple loaf. And here it is. And it smells fantastic. It's called a cottage loaf, and it's made from 2 round pieces of dough. The smaller piece of dough is placed on top of the larger piece and is often dusted with flour before baking. It's a very old-fashioned English type of bread. Makes it look a bit funny, like a double-decker. Back in the olden days, making the bread like this meant you could get more in the oven. And that means more to enjoy. See you next time.
George explores the grain chain with support from farmers and millers across the UK.